Welcome, everybody. This is Pastor Tom welcoming you to another study in the Word. I want to thank you for joining me today. And I'm excited about this as we are doing our 20th session on 1 Timothy, verse by verse. And so we're going to start off today by reading out of 1 Timothy chapter 3. And we were going through this, and then I stopped. I did a few things concerning a little test that we could find out where we're at spiritually speaking. And so we're going to continue now verse by verse. So 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1. This is a true saying, if a man desire the office of the bishop, he desires a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, a husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, and apt to teach. We got that far. And then we did our little test. So today we're going to start with verse 3, and we're going to go through there. So verse 3, not given to wine. Stop there. This is a no-brainer. There's not a whole lot needs to be said about that. The word given to wine means, of course, to be addicted to wine, or we could even paraphrase and say any intoxicants. We have a lot of those going around today. We've got both drugs that are illegal and legal drugs that can become addicting. And so the point here being is, whether it be alcohol, wine, drugs, a bishop cannot be a drunk or addicted or a addict. So that's just kind of a no-brainer. Then the next word here is no striker. A little blind to us maybe, no striker. But actually the word striker here means someone who is a bully. And this word here could be used in context of somebody that is a bully with their mouth, or somebody that is a bully with their fists, and or tries to bully people by intimidating them because of their size or whatever. Bullies are no good. I used to have to deal with that at school all the time. When I went into schools, because my parents, my dad was in an occupation where we moved all the time, kind of like being in the military. About every 6 months, when I was a child, we'd move. And boy, I tell you what, the bullies would come and try to bully you. And when I would come into the new school, I just got in the habit of picking the biggest guy out, the bully, and just immediately going over and picking a fight with him to get that over with. Because if you allow a bully to bully you, it can be really rough. Well, we can't be bullies and be in church. And a lot of people, or bishops or leaders in church, and I've seen a lot of pastors. I've seen a lot of pastors that were bullies. I've seen them bully people around. I've seen them push people around. I've seen them intimidate people with their words, with their position and authority. My brother, these things should not be, because somebody who bullies like that, there's really an element of control, ungodly control that's trying to go on there. There should be no reason for us to bully people. We don't need to control people that way. And so God doesn't want us to be in leadership if we have that type of thing. And then the next part of this says, not greedy of filthy lucre, which is in the King James a little hard for us to understand what he's talking about there. Some people have translated this, money is filthy, but money is not filthy. It depends on what you use it for. Money's just money. Money can be filthy, or money can be blessed and be sanctified. So if you're using your money for tithes and offerings and advancement of the kingdom of God, your money is blessed. If you've got a right attitude toward money, that's a blessed. You're in a blessed situation with your attitude. But if you're addicted to going after wealth the wrong way, your attitude toward money is wrong. You think money is the end of all things, and all you want to do is be wealthy, and you'll do anything to get money, and you'll get involved in every scheme and everything else, pyramid scheme to get money. Those are the type of things that he's talking about here. You got to be careful about how every bishop needs to be careful about their attitude toward finances and money. And then it goes on and says that we are to be patient. Well, that word's long-suffering, patient. And that's a very, very important attribute in any bishop. You're going to have to be patient with people. You're going to have to learn how to suffer long with them. because many of them are in different places spiritually speaking, and anybody that's in a position of authority and leadership in the church is going to be dealing with people at all kinds of different levels of spiritual growth. Some of them advance more than others. Some of them's personalities are different than others. Some of them are harder to work with than others. Some are very easy to work with. Some are very difficult to work with. And so this patience needs to kick in. And endurance is good, but you also have to have, kindness with the endurance. So that's an important aspect. We have to develop that long suffering. Then it goes on to the next word and says, not a brawler. Now, we just saw that, God doesn't want us to be a bully. A brawler is a little bit different. This is somebody that's quick-tempered, that flies off the handle very quickly, hot-headed. This is one who likes to argue, likes to fight, likes to fly off all the time, and will use their fists if necessary. They're strikers. They just like to be in a stressful, strifeful situation. And man, you can't be like that if you're going to be in leadership, because strife is the worst thing. Where there's envy and strife, there's confusion and many and evil types of work. So we don't want to be strikers. We don't want to be people that fly off. You got to have your emotions under control. You can't be hot-headed like that and be in ministry. That's something that needs to be purged out of us. Praise God. Then the next word is not covetous. Always wanting what they can't have. Always wanting what somebody else got. Feeling bad about how they got blessed and you didn't. That kind of thing. Covet somebody's money. Covet somebody's wife. Covet somebody's car. If you got that coveting spirit, man, I tell you what, that drive people nuts. I never really had that a struggle with that myself. I don't, but I guess some people do. But we shouldn't be people that covet other people's positions, covet other people's possessions, things, cars, wives, or any of that. It's just something that you can't have. You can't have that type of personality or attitude in the ministry. So that's important. The next thing, the fourth thing, or that I'm looking at here, is one who rules, his own household. Now let me read it. One that rules well his own household, his old house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. Great point. So here's one who rules. First thing I want you to notice, he has rules. You got to have rules. You have to have discipline, and you got to know how to take those rules. Rules are an important part of life. By that I mean this: principles or laws or rules. You can call anything you want to. In your own household, as an example, if you have a family, there has to be some rules. The children have to have rules. When they need to be home, what time they need to be home, what they need to have rules about doing chores, doing them right, doing them on time. There has to be rules about school, attending school, and paying attention when they're at school, and so on, whatever your schooling is. There needs to be rules concerning how you spend your money, overspending, balanced budgets, what we buy at this time, what we don't buy at this time. There's a long list. And what he's talking about here is having that discipline in your own particular life, because if a guy can't have that kind of discipline at home, or a girl, a lady, then how can they take care of the Church of God, which needs to have discipline that way? There needs to be a set of structure, rules. Sometimes we call them policies. You know what I'm saying? There has to be that structure. That's really important. Then they have to be able to raise their household, raise their children properly. They have to keep their children with all subjection. That just simply means keep your children in control. Your children must be respectful. They must be well behaved, and they must be in order, not running wild, not crazy out there and running all over the place. So he admonishes us to do so in our households, and because if we don't know how to do that, verse 5 says, and that's put in there, that's not really there in the original, but it's a good point anyway. For if a man know how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? That's a good point, but that's true. So there you go. Now let's go on to the next word, verse 6, not a novice. This one here is important. The word novice, if you look in most commentaries, it'll simply say that's a new convert. Well, that's a little light to me. There can be a lot of novices. Of course, a new convert would be a novice. Doesn't know anything yet, of course. A baby Christian shouldn't be put in a position of bishop's leadership or anything else. They should sit in the church for a certain amount of time just listening, even before they get involved in some menial tasks. Because a new convert is a new convert, needs to be fed for a while. They're little babies, you know. You can't give a little baby a whole lot to do. And so a new convert can't certainly, you would say that is a novice. But how about a new plant? As an example, let's say you have somebody that's hasn't been in your congregation, and then they come from the outside over, and you don't know them. You don't just stick them in a position of authority and leadership. And a lot of pastors make that decision, and that is I've seen that destroy congregations, literally. And even if they think they know the person, I know this person, I know their parents. I've known them since they were little kids. They've been serving the Lord for many years. Well, if you really know them, that might be fine. But if you don't really know them, if you don't know their attitudes, you haven't been around them, you don't know what they think, how they react with pressure, and they haven't been proved, that can get you. So I would consider, if I was a pastor or a leader, if you possibly can, to work from the inside of your congregation with these people that you put into spiritual positions or even natural positions of leadership, because it's easier to know them if they work with you over a period of time. So it can be that somebody who is a new plant who moves in and comes from somewhere else. I think you need to move them into things fairly slowly. You can give them something to do, but make sure it's not a leadership position where they're affecting people. Because, you know, it takes them a while to get to know people. How long does it take to get to know people, Pastor Tom, as far as you're concerned? Well, before I release anybody into positions of authority, as far as in my church as pastoral, it would take probably at least 7 years, or more, sometimes less, depending maybe on the person. But I got to tell you something. I got to know some people, and I found over the years that the longer they're with you, the more they establish trust. The more they trust you, the more you can trust them. You know, there's got to be that work both ways. And so it's important not to just pop somebody new in there, even though they got talent. You can put them in there on a probationary, on probationary terms, if you make it very clear what that means. And by that I mean, okay, I'm going to let you lead us in worship here. You're not the worship leader yet. You're a worship leader in training. And we'll see how you do. We're just going to work together and see how that goes. You can do that, but you have to make it clear what that is. And you got to make it clear to the congregation what that is. And the word can be inexperienced. A person that comes over there, and you can't slap somebody in a state that's inexperienced in any kind of a leadership role. And people do it all the time. Just don't have the experience, but here you go. You know, boy, you can destroy people that way, and they get lifted up with pride and hurt and so on. Because it says in the very next verse, what happens to them, they'd be lifted up with pride, and then they fall into the condemnation or the judgment that was on the devil. Here's what happened to the devil. The devil got lifted up because of pride, and because he tried to exalt himself above the throne of God, he got cast down. It was never the same for him. A horrible mistake. And this is what happens when you put an inexperienced or a novice in, or a new plant or something like that that's not ready, into a position of spiritual leadership or natural leadership. They become lifted up with pride, self-exaltation. They fall into the judgment and chastisement of the devil, who fell and took over and took people with him. Now, let me read this to you out of the Amplified Bible because I really like it. This is 1 Timothy chapter 3. Let me get over there here. Give me a second. And I want to read this to you because it's pretty interesting. Let's see. That's verse, 6. Let me go down here. And it says this. And he must not be a new convert, so that he will not behave stupidly and become conceited by appointment to this high office, and fall into the same condemnation incurred by the devil for his ignorance and his pride. So that explains it pretty well. The word pride is an interesting word because it kind of, to illustrate pride, it's like, you can be sitting in a room smoking a pipe, and you can put something underneath the doors, all the cracks and everything, and that room will fill with smoke to the point where you can't see even your hand in front of your face. And that's what the word pride means. You really enter into a spiritual deception. It started out maybe small, but that's because you opened yourself up to this by putting somebody in there too fast. Pride comes in, deception comes in, and people just go from one level of deception to another level of deception. And before you know it, you have somebody that is in a spirit, in a place of leadership because you put them there. And the next thing you know, they're running off with half your congregation, or they're bringing in some terrible dissension into the church. Remember, the devil was the one who caused the first church split. 1/3 of the angels began to follow them. And I see this, I don't know how many times I've seen this now. It's just a no-brainer to me. But yet, pastors and leaders do it all the time. I like this person. I'm just going to put them in there. Do you know them? How long have they worked with you? Have they been proven? Are they really as spiritual as you think? Have you watched how they work under pressure? Have you taken the time to understand that anybody can put on a good front? It's kind of like the guy who's dating. When you first date, you find your wife or somebody you think you love or whatever, and you're dating, they are on their best behavior. And I mean, every time they get together, they smell good, they look good, they watch what they say, they treat you like a queen, all that. And then they get married, and about 6 months down the road, you find out they're not really like that. And all that other stuff starts coming out, and it can be devastating. Well, it's the same way in a relationship with the church. It all looks good, smells good at first, but what happens when they go through some trial? What happens when you do something they don't like, or you say something they don't like, or maybe even you preach something they don't understand totally? What happens? How do they handle that? You see, those are things that you need to know before you start letting novices into positions of power. Because that, I tell you what, that is a devastating thing. Then verse 7 says, moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without, lest he fall into the reproach and the snare of the devil. Now this is really interesting because it says here, they must have a good report of them which are without. Who are those? Well, the people out there that aren't Christians. People in your particular city or your town or whatever. It's very important that a bishop or a leader or spiritual leader or a deacon is not doing stuff that brings reproach. I remember when I was a little kid, we never went to church. I was raised in pretty much a secular home. And my parents were good parents, basically, but we didn't go to church, and at least not that I remember. And but I do remember my parents having parties at the house, and we were supposed to be in bed. But you could never sleep in there when they were having a party like that. It was loud. Well, they didn't do it that much, but every once in a while they would do that. And I can remember me and my sister would sneak out and hide somewhere so we could see what's going on in there, but they wouldn't see us, And man, I saw people, dancing crazy with lampshades on their head, and they're belligerent and drunk and everything. You know how people get. And but also knew that was so and so is a a deacon at the First whatever it is church down here. And Saturday night they're out doing that, or Friday night, and then Sunday morning they're going to be over there, leader in the church, and they're acting like that in front of people. That's just not setting a very good example, is it? Well, it's the same way. I was at my parents' home, and I was I can't remember, 21 years old, whatever it was, and I'm sitting there. And we're having a party. They're having a party over there. So I got my beer, and I'm partying away, and I'm just sitting there. And then all of a sudden, this nice looking lady. She was older though. I was 21. She had to be at least 35. she comes up and it was very apparent that she was making some advances towards me, and not a way that is a good thing. And it was very apparent that I could have pulled the trigger on that if I would have wanted to. I did not do that. To my hallelujah, I did not do that. But I found out later she was the pastor's wife of the local church down there. See, and that kind of thing. When that kind of stuff happens, that's not a good report without. It's also not a good report when somebody gets thrown into jail, they have money problems, they don't pay their bills, their creditors are all goofed up. They're goofed up with their creditors and all of that. So people in this community must think highly of them, and there must not be any of those type of things, because that will cause them to fall into reproach, or people will look at that and go, oh man, those Christians, they're a bunch of, hypocrites and all the stuff they say. And we'll get enough of that without that. But it's also a snare of the devil. If somebody, I'll never forget this. This literally happened. I was in Reno, Nevada pastoring, and I had a friend who pastored a church in Reno, Nevada. Great church. This really happened on Sunday morning. They're worshiping God. They have a pretty good sized worship team. So they're worshiping away, and all of a sudden, in the doors of the back of the church, come the SWAT team. Everybody on the ground, nobody move. This really happened. SWAT team, a bunch of FBI people. Whatever you call that. Anyway, they came in, and what they did is they had been looking for somebody who was a very wanted suspect, dangerous. They said who they'd been looking for a long time. They found out that he went to this church, and he was up on the worship team. And they came and hauled him out of there. Found out this guy was a hardened criminal, and he was, that's bad. Well, if you have a past like that, and it could be, a snare. And you can get into all kinds of issues. So we don't need to take the whole church down with you, and you don't need to cause a controversy like that. So that's just common sense. But the devil can use that against you. If you have to go to tax court and you're a bishop or something like that, and all of a sudden, man, you didn't pay taxes, people find out about it. It can cause real problems in the church. And excuse me, actually cause, a church split or something like that, because people lose confidence in you, those type of things. So anyway, we got to verse 8. Likewise, must the deacons. Now he's going to talk about the deacons, which are the spiritual leader, the spiritual side of the church. And the deacons must be grave. I think we talked about that. Did I miss that? If I missed that, I'm sorry, but the word grave, this is mentioned for the, I think it might be mentioned for the bishop. I don't know if it was, but the word grave here means a modest, excellent person, a dignified individual who has awe-inspiring qualities, abilities, and habits. This is a person who stands out in the community. They know how to handle themselves in every situation. They know how to dress. They know how to greet people. They know how to etiquette. They can be, they're outstanding in character. People know them. They see them. It's that type of thing. So the deacons need to be that type of person. They need to be somebody that is can be admired that way. Then it goes on and says, not double-tongued. This is interesting. This double-tonguedness means a gossip. That's bad enough, somebody that gossips. But it's a gossip who not only talks about others, but changes the truth the more he talks about them. In other words, he could start off, did you hear about Harry? Harry did this and this. By the time the double-tongued person's done with him, he's added 4 more things to the whole fire. And that's what it means. So a deacon can't be that kind of person that talks double talk like that. Not given to much wine. We already talked about that. Same thing here. A deacon can't be one that is hitting the sauce all, just an alcoholic or a drug addict, or hitting the bong pipe, or Pam in the sock, or nowadays they use household cleaners and snort it and whatever that is. Okay, you don't want to be like that. Wow, that's just something else. Not given much wine, not greedy, a filthy lucre. Again, just like we just talked about, you can't. The deacon must, all right, have his finances in control, attitude towards finances under control. I will mention to you also, of course, you would never want anybody in your leadership team that does not tithe and give offerings, and have that all together. Amen. So that's important. And so, not giving much wine, not greedy of filthy lucre, holding the mystery of the faith in a pure conscience. Real interesting. What does that mean? Well, it means that they not only believe the things that they say they believe, but they act on them. It's a lifestyle of truly living by faith, or a doer of the word. That's what that means. So these deacons must be doers of the word, not just hearers of the word. Okay? That's what that means. Then it goes on. This is really interesting, this part here. It says, and let these also first be proved. We've talked about that considerably, so I'm not going to go into that anymore. That proving has to be that's that intense time where they're tested as to whether their character can hold up under all these things. And then it says, and then let them use the office of a deacon, being found blameless. Again, the word blameless is not perfect. It just means that they've been proved so that Satan cannot find a way in with these character deficiencies that we're just talking about, the things it says you have to have. Okay, so they got to be proven that there is no way in there for the devil, so he can't accuse them of all this stuff or get in there and cause problems in the church or whatever it is. Now, this is really interesting, because in verse 11 it says, and even so must their wives. Okay, now your translation may say, and the women deacons. All right, this is interesting, because what is this really? King James infers that it's their wives. Some other translation says it can be a woman deacon. Now, I wholeheartedly believe women can be in ministry, and I wholeheartedly believe that women can even be bishops, and I wholeheartedly believe that women can be deacons. We know that Phoebe was a deaconess, as an example. But I think it might mean both, and just let me explain what I'm talking about here. Okay, if you are a bishop's wife, the bishop happened to be the husband, and they're married, the wife would need, for ministry's sake, to have a certain level of spirituality about her and growth, or it ain't going to work. I'm telling you right now, this is one of the worst things people do. It's the same way with the deacon. If you're going to stand in the office of the deacon, then your wife, if you're a man, or your husband, if you're a woman, would have to have a certain level of spiritual growth. I'm telling you right now, this is what it's talking about. If you are a woman deacon or bishop, you certainly would have to have a certain amount of spiritual growth. You would have to have all these other attributes. You wouldn't be the husband of one wife, and I'm just saying the rest of the attributes you would have to have. And so, woman deacon or woman bishops or wives of deacons or bishops must be, and it goes on and he talks about this, grave. Again, this is that word, having a marvelous, excellent virtues, inspiring, know how to dress properly as a spiritual woman, modestly, know how to handle themselves in public, know how to work with other people, all of those kind of things. Truly important. Then it says, and not a slanderer. This is one who actually is used of the devil and accuses people, falsely slanders people with no reason, drags their name through the mud. You can't have a woman deacon or a bishop's wife or deacon's wife that acts like that. And this then there's the word sober is used here. It doesn't mean sober just on dope or alcohol, which would be true, but it means also their emotions and their minds need to be under control. And this is especially important for ladies. So it says that if you're a deacon lady or a bishop lady or a wife of a bishop lady or a wife of a deacon, you're going to have be sober-minded and have the ability to think logically and biblically and not fly off the handle and get all emotional about everything. Then it goes on and says, faithful in all things. So these women must be faithful in all things. That is a lot of territory in that. So you would have to, if you're a woman deacon, a woman bishop, wife of a bishop, or with the bishop who's a husband, let me give it to you that way, a man, his wife has to have these attributes or he function in ministry. And people don't understand that. You can't be in full-time ministry as far as God's concerned and have a husband who could care less about the things of God, living with him and then being out in ministry all the time. I've seen that kind of stuff and it just never works out. There's something wrong about that, and there's something that's never right about that. And so if you're going to be in ministry and you're married, any kind of leadership and you're married, it's not just about you, it's about your spouse, because the spiritual attacks that are going to come to you are going to come to your spouse. And believe me when I say this, if you're a man and you drag a woman, as an example, into a situation like pastoring a church and they are not ready for it, you are going to hurt your marriage, possibly destroy your marriage, and it's going to be hell on earth. And I've seen this. I've seen it many times. So it's important that we understand that if we're going to be involved in ministry, we have to not just think about ourselves and our character, but our spouse's character, where they're at spiritually, before we go hopping there. I hope you enjoyed that. Run out of time. And maybe we'll go back over some of that in our next session, because that's so intense and so cool there. I didn't really finish that, so I think we should. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please go to our website, faithalivefellowship.org, and there you can donate if you want to donate toward our ministry. If you enjoy listening to us and we feed you, then you should probably consider doing that. And also, if you would like to, there's free seminars over there. You can leave prayer requests. That's faithalivefellowship.org. And then also, you can please subscribe. And if this has been a blessing to you and you think other people need to hear this, young preachers coming up, preparing for ministry and stuff, they need to hear these messages. Why don't you share it? Share it with people all over the internet. That's how these things get distributed. And I appreciate that. Until next time, remember this: feed your faith and starve your doubts to death. God bless you.